Well, happy Monday morning here. Welcome to the Markcast. It's cottage season, cabin season, as I said on Twitter. On vacation, like many CFL fans, not watching. Can't watch the games, and we're out at the cottage, whatever. We are here. No days off. We have Jason Hussey here. Evan's on vacation as well, having Wi-Fi issues. So we'll see how that goes. We have Jason here. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, Reed. A great weekend of football, and the weather's great, so no complaints from me.
We had a discussion a few weeks ago. Is Chad Kelly the most important player in the CFL? Is Dustin Crum the most important player in the CFL right now?
I mean, if Chad Kelly didn't exist, I think, yes, he would be for sure. I mean, just an incredible couple of weeks for Dustin Crum. Haven't really seen anything like it.
To have Dustin Crum, have the Ottawa Redblacks as a whole be kind of must-watch CFL TV right now. It's pretty insane. The Sunday night game really has lucked out with that. General thoughts just coming into today. What did you make of the weekend?
Well, I thought that the weekend on the whole was pretty disappointing up until the Sunday game, but last night's game made up for it and then some. I thought this was one of the most entertaining CFL games that I've seen in many years, and just seeing both quarterbacks at the top of their game, just going back and forth, trading blows. It was just such a fun game to watch, and really the highlight of the week.
Because we've had complaints, right, about Mayer and everything. And I watched early on, he had the pick six and everything coming off. Like, you think Mayer kind of stepped up last night?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously he had the three turnovers, the two interceptions, and then I think he also had a fumble. But honestly, I think overall he played really well. 450 yards, 4 touchdown passes. Had his team in position with a lead late to win the game. If the defense just got one more stop, they would have won the game. So I definitely don't fault him for the loss at all. I thought he played his best game of the season by far so far, and I think that's a good trend that we've seen the last couple of weeks. I thought his best game of the year was last week before last week, and then this week was even better. So it's good to see that from Mayer and any quarterback in the CFL.
I mean, this really feels, 450 yards passing and 4 TD really feels like this is what was promised when we kind of got into the CFL. And it's like, okay, what's the deal? Like, there's this crazy Canadian Football League, and you get Matt Dunnigan's throwing for however many hundreds of yards, and you can do it. Like, it felt a little bit more high octane that way than maybe we've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, the last couple of years, it's just kind of been like a feeling out period. I mean, we had a period about like 5 to 10 years ago where we had a bunch of Hall of Fame level quarterbacks, and it was kind of similar to this. We saw games like this all the time, and hopefully we're getting back into that era with a couple of these young quarterbacks emerging here, and hopefully the 2 quarterbacks we saw in last night's game are a part of that.
We'll bring Evan on here again. Evan's fighting Wi-Fi issues just at the hotel, not his own. So we'll see. We'll see how it holds up. Evan, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Yeah, having a bit of network problems, as you've probably already said, but I've got my personal hotspot going, and that seems to be all right. So we're gonna test this, see how it turns out.
We do our best here. I wanted to say, and I was going to say off the top, comments last week on the show, because Jason posted a video over on his channel, and what's the deal with you guys not watching all the games? Or like, all the games are watched. All the games are watched between all 3 of us. We're on vacation. I've worked the last 5 days. I'm on vacation with my family. Evan's on vacation in Palm Springs on this personal Wi-Fi. Jason's watching the games on demand. Like, I don't want to hear any of this. We're doing the best we can here, to try and bring this coverage on here. Jason, do you have any comments to add to that? Because I know it was on your channel.
No, just that we do our best to watch every second of football that we possibly can. And like you said, we all work jobs. So, we just do our best around here to give you guys the best analysis we can.
Yeah, the comment was, I'm going to go back to 3 Down Nation to watch it. And then John Hodge was at a wedding last week and missed some of the games. So how that works out. Evan, Dustin Crum effect here really in spectacular fashion. What did you make of our guy?
Yeah, I mean, Dustin, I think the Dustin Crum era has officially arrived. And, it's been great to see him really hit his stride. And you never want to speak too soon with these type of things. But I really think that, this could be the beginning of something special. And maybe Ottawa now has the ability to go on a run that they didn't have before. And I will say this, even if things, maybe are still a bit rocky here and there, with Crum's performance, he could easily go out next week and throw 3 interceptions. I certainly hope he doesn't do that, but it's a possibility. I think, this is the most hope Ottawa fans have had in a long time. Right now, there's a lot of excitement around the Red Blacks, and using the term excitement and Red Blacks together has not been used, again, in a very long time. And that's not a shot at the Red Blacks or their fans, but it's just the truth. I mean, they haven't been winning many games. There hasn't been much to write home about there. So to see Dustin kind of finally lift this organization up and make them competitive in the East here early in the season, it definitely shakes some things up. I mean, if you look at the standings right now, they're ahead of Montreal, they're ahead of Hamilton. Now, I know Montreal was on the bye this week. They played one less game, but still, I mean, they're making a lot of progress here. Like, it went from, Ottawa being kind of at the bottom with no way, to go up, to now it's like they're, just behind Toronto.
I really did think that Crum was kind of this one-trick pony, and we had seen the scrambling and all of that, and we had talked last week on the show, and how was Winnipeg not ready, but kind of being able to do it on the air, with his feet and on the air, like it feels a little bit more well-rounded, where I thought that they were going to be able to figure it out, or like, okay, you can only scramble so much. Jason, I mean, what do you make now to be able to do, kind of that half game, whatever, and then the 2 full games now of him being able to replicate this?
Yeah, so I thought the same thing as you, Reed. I thought that, in the first half of this game, it was much like we saw against Winnipeg, where he did most of his damage with his legs. And obviously, he's a gifted runner, like 6'4", long strides, very tough guy to bring down in the pocket. But I thought in the second half, Calgary really adjusted, slowed down his ability to run, really put a spy on them. I think it was Cameron Judge they used to kind of shadow him, and he still beat them with his arms. So I think that was very encouraging, just being a true dual threat quarterback. And, I think that was very encouraging to see.
Yeah, I had your tweet here. You talking biggest story coming out, Dustin Crum. We also had here Gary Stern watching the games all weekend. Yes, what a great game! I love live tweeting along with Gary on here, and then we had this, Milt Stiegel, friend of the show. The Red Blacks, the most exciting team in the CFL. I'll present that first to Evan, and then you, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Emery Hunt put out a tweet and he said this is starting to look like that Broncos season with Tim Tebow, where it's the team might not be essentially on paper one of the better teams, but they keep finding ways to win at the very end and, having these exciting, back and forth thriller type of games. But really, I think the reason Ottawa won this game, just again on paper, is they had, more rushing yards. They were able to run the ball more effectively. And we'll get into this, with the other games, but a lot of teams this week couldn't run the ball. It was a shame. And I had mentioned last week, the reason Winnipeg lost to Ottawa in that, overtime game where Ottawa came all the way back was because Winnipeg, couldn't run the ball. They couldn't run the clock. It was just really unfortunate on that part. And I mean, several other teams struggle with that this week. Calgary was a juggernaut on offense. You had Jake Mayer, throwing for 450 yards, finding Mark and Michelle, Trey Odoms, Dukes. We'll get into more of those guys here in a minute. But they couldn't run the ball either. And Ottawa, just had such an effective ground game that they were churning out, so many yards on, both aspects of the offense, again, on the ground, through the air. Calgary, even if you're throwing for 450 yards, which is an insane number, by the way, for a single game, even if it goes into overtime, I just think they were no match at the end of the day with the way Ottawa was running that ball.
Jason, yeah, is Ottawa the most exciting team right now?
They're close. They're getting up there. Obviously, these back-to-back exciting games really puts them up there. But I got to go with Toronto. I think Toronto is still the story of the season. I just love watching what Chad Kelly's doing, even as a Tiger Cats fan, just removing the bias from it. Just a very exciting player to watch. They look like a fine-oiled machine, and I think they're the most exciting team in the CFL right now.
Yeah, we had a tweet here as well. Dave Wardle, he's a friend on Twitter here. And also today, I don't know if they're tweets anymore. We see the X now. Twitter rebranded, like, oh, we got to pull up this X, whatever. I wish I could find the tweet, but our man Farhan said earlier this season, Red Blacks are a good team waiting on a quarterback. I think they found their quarterback. I ain't betting against them the rest of the year. I mean, we talked about this with Mazzoli coming back and that horrificness, and hey, they're just ready to go. And we didn't know, right, when they come back, is he going to make a difference? Evan, what do you make of that? And just through, however many, was it been 4 quarterbacks now, kind of finally figuring out, and maybe we have a landing spot here with Dustin Crum?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, again, Crum, and I had mentioned this before, has had now over a year to develop in that system. He signed with the team last season. So I think he's finally sort of adjusting. And it looks like he's definitely been prepared for this opportunity. There's a lot of quarterbacks that come into this league, and they're not prepared. It takes a long time to develop the quarterback position, especially in the CFL. But Dustin Crum is kind of proving that wrong. And, he's been one of the better all-around players, I think, in the league over the past 2 weeks. Again, at first, we kind of just thought he was more of a mobile quarterback, could have been I think, had this scenario not played out, I mean, he could have been one of the better short yardage quarterbacks in the CFL, just given, his rushing ability. But clearly, he is a true dual threat. And this game was the perfect display of that. There's been a couple, even in that Winnipeg-Ottawa game, again, where Ottawa came all the way back, Crum did a lot more with his legs in that game, I think, than he did with his arm. But in this one, he finally kind of opened up the offense, passing, and really got the ball out and was just really efficient all around. So, yeah, I think, right now, Dustin Crum is definitely sort of the biggest up-and-comer in the league. There's a couple other guys. It really does go to show, though, how, I mean, and this is across all football, any league, whatever, college, how much the quarterback position really does affect your play. Because I feel like a lot of these teams are one quarterback away, or they lost a quarterback. I mean, look at Saskatchewan. We'll get into them later. Mason Fine had one of the weirdest games I'd ever seen, where he completed over 30 passes, but didn't throw for 300 yards, still had 2 turnovers. I mean, just such a wild kind of event. So it's a very kind of complex thing. You open it up, you say, well, yeah, Dustin Crum, right now is the guy that he was their missing piece for Ottawa, but I feel like you could say that about so many other teams in their situations as well.
Jason, looking ahead here next week, Hamilton at Ottawa. Are you scared now? I mean, you might not have been too scared about this game a couple weeks ago.
Well, if this is Taylor Powell versus Dustin Crum, it'd be interesting because these are two quarterbacks coming out of the MAC conference, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be an interesting thing. I think Taylor Powell actually did look pretty good this week. We'll get to that when we talk about the Ticats game. But, I think that would be a very interesting matchup. Just reading before I went on here that Bo Levi Mitchell is back at practice for the Ticats as well. So maybe he's back this week. We'll see what happens. But huge game for the Ticats. If they win that game, they'll be 3-4 and jump the Red Blacks in the standings and win the season series already over them. But if they lose, they're really putting themselves behind the 8 ball this first third of the season.
Just Ryan, I just wanted to show this. Ryan checking in. Has Stamps ever won an OT game? Not clutch in there. I feel that way about talking about the Mariners sometimes here, watching the game yesterday. And then the CFL news here, talking, hey, buy your tickets to exciting games. Gary Stern predicting the sellout. I mean, this is, who knew this was must watch Ottawa here. Let's get into the actual game here. Thoughts, I guess we'll go. Let me pull up the standings or whatever. We'll go to Jason first. Thoughts on the game itself.
Yeah, so I thought the game was just your classic back and forth. There were a lot of lead changes in this game. I thought that, Ottawa jumped out to a pretty big lead in the first half. I believe it was 11 points or so after a couple of turnovers by Calgary's offense. But Calgary made several big plays in this one. And I think that's the most encouraging thing coming out of this game if you're Calgary, is that the big criticism was that they couldn't throw the ball deep down the field. It was a bunch of slant routes and the running game that was really the driving force of that offense. But they hit a lot of big plays in this one, and it was very encouraging to see. But as you saw at the end of the game, I think Ottawa just matched them punch for punch. Dustin Crum was up for every challenge. The Red Blacks just kind of have a little bit of a feel about them right now. Rookie head coach and Bob Dice bring a lot more energy to that organization. So I thought this was one of the most exciting games I've seen for the CFL in a long time, like I said a few minutes ago. And, I thought it was a great game.
Yeah, I mean, we had the last weekend, and then we had our big, is quarterback, what's happening here, a CFL quarterback crisis. Yeah, not all the games must watch this weekend, but certainly this one kind of living up. And, we've talked about this when you have 4 games a weekend, you're going to have some stickers. The NFL, we can put, Panthers, Browns or whatever on in the morning, 10 a.m. No one's going to watch it. Like, Evan, what did you make of this really kind of the standout game of the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, well, I thought it was nice that it was the last game of the weekend because, to be entirely honest, the 3 games before that were pretty hit or miss at times. I think, especially, I just felt the other ones felt so slow, and then you have this one where both teams are scoring 40+ points and it's going into overtime and everything like that. I've already talked a decent amount about the Ottawa side and kind of what it means for them, so I'll focus on Calgary a bit more here. I was impressed ultimately with Jake Mayer. I think, again, like Jason said, Calgary's big play ability has been pretty limited. And to be honest, a lot of their offense for the entire year, I think, has been centered more around the run game, more or less, outside of a couple, bigger games from Reggie Bagleton and maybe Luther Hakunavanu last week. But then, I mean, man, the floodgates open this time. It was just, boom, 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 like big play here, big play there. Mark and Michelle legacy game. It was my big takeaway from this one. And I had mentioned on the show a week or two ago, I really thought Mark and Michelle could be the wide receiver one in this offense, now that he's back. And that's nothing against Reggie, who I think, might be the best receiver on this team, one of the best. He's right up there with Markin. But, I think just Michelle bringing, whatever it is, 4 years of NFL experience back to the Stampeders from the last time he was there. I think that can't be overlooked. And it really showed in this game. I mean, man, he was all over the place, 2 big plays. And I mean, it's just really good to see that from him. And it's to be honest, I mean, it's quite a uptick in performance from what it's been. He's kind of had a slow sort of start getting worked into the offense there. But then obviously in this game, he was the number one receiver, and it wasn't really close. I mean, the other guy, Trey Odoms-Dukes, who was the other 100-yard receiver in this game. I'd also talked about him previously as someone who I thought, could be worked into this offense. Like him and Luther Hakunavanu, I think are, in the large scale of things, probably 2 of the more most underrated receivers in the entire CFL, not just on the Stampeders roster. But, Trey stepped up again big time. And, again, just good to see him doing his thing.
Jason, anything else on this one?
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit of defense here. So first for Ottawa, I thought that one of the big keys for them is that they slowed down Calgary's running game, which is something that Calgary always likes to utilize. A couple guys I want to shout out here. Brandon Dandridge, defensive back, had a pick 6 in this one. Back-to-back games with a pick 6 for him. Also had a punt return touchdown earlier this season. So he's accounted for a lot of that team's scoring so far this season and is on pace to be a CFL All-Star by the end of the year. Lorenzo Malden, who was carted off midway through last week during practice. It didn't look good, but then he ended up playing in the game, and he had a big fumble recovery in this one. So really impressive for him. And then for Calgary, I think, a couple weeks ago, I would have said I was more concerned about Calgary's offense. But now I'm more concerned about their defense. This defense cannot close games out to save their lives. They tried to give away the game last week against Saskatchewan. Obviously, that big Hail Mary by Mason Fine, and then they were able to get it back in the last minute. But they had a couple of opportunities, like I mentioned before, that they had a lead with a chance to make a stop late in the game, and they just could not do it. And Dave Dickinson, I think, had said something like that in his post-game press conference, that he is sick of this kind of lack of killer instinct with this team. And I think that, it's really true with this team. They're just not closing games effectively. And that's just kind of a weird thing to see from the Stampeders because of all the success they've had over the past decade or so.
Yeah, changing times here. I had a couple of just last tweets before we get off of this game. He's the go. Renee, clutch there, getting them in 2,000 career points. Obviously not enough to win the overtime, but getting them in there. To me, I'm like, there's no doubt. Like, I'm like, oh, this game's going to overtime. I had it pulled up here. I just wanted to shout out Tim Baines for Too Long Unwatchable. Ottawa Redblacks can't miss after winning another overtime thriller, beating Ottawa. And I thought this was funny. Dave Naylor tweeted from Dustin Crumb's NFL draft bio, he lacks the creativity and power to make defenders miss or break tackles. Someone tell that to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Really enjoy that, guys. Anything else on this one? We'll go to the America's CFL team here. But anything else on that game? No? All right. Let's go here. We're pulling into the cabin when this game was going on, and then I got it pulled up. Vernon already going down before I even had the game up. The notes today, I think, was he's fine. They might rest him this week against the Elks. I'm glad we didn't ship Dan Evans here kind of when there was the big quarterback. People trying to find different whatevers and bring Dustin Crumbs to the world. Thoughts here? I guess we'll go to Evan first. Thoughts on Saskatchewan, BC?
Yeah, well, definitely a slower game. I mean, 19-9, the score kind of indicates that. Unfortunately, there's been several CFL games, really, I think, over the past, maybe 2 seasons that have gone this way. But now you're finally seeing the league as a whole kind of pick up on offense. I think, the games last week, obviously, and then the big shootout between Ottawa and Calgary. CFL is definitely getting back in their groove, and I think I put a tweet out about that. But anyway, going back to this game specifically, the fact that BC was able to pull away, despite losing Vernon early, I think is a big testament to their defense. They had a lot of guys in that unit that really stepped up, and it kind of made it to where they, didn't have to worry about things. But then, on the Saskatchewan side, just a really weird game on their end. I mean, I talked earlier about Mason Fine. Just kind of felt like, short pass here, short pass there. I mean, he completed 31 passes in this game, which I find fascinating. And I mean, he did have a, big play, long of 44 yards, whatever. But he, on the entire game slate, he only finished with 278 yards. And, through 2 picks. It was just so weird. Like, typically, if a quarterback completes 31 passes in a game. I mean, they're throwing for, 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's like a career evening. But this was kind of the opposite of that, I felt like. And again, the run game, I had talked about how some CFL teams, struggle with that this week. Saskatchewan's was atrocious, unfortunately, abysmal. There was no other word for it. It was just really, really bad. And every time, I look at a team, where they throw 40 times a game, but they're not able to run the ball effectively, that typically, I'm like, you don't even have to show me the score. I know that team lost. And in this case, Saskatchewan did that. Now, they did have a couple bright spots. I think it was Tevin Jones and Sean Bain Jr. Were kind of a nice receiving duo, and both of those guys, I think, have kind of stepped up this season, maybe more so than I expected. But yeah, ultimately, I think, this was just a testament really to BC's defense more than anything to close this one out.
Yeah, I had the tweet here, Hodge, and I think Dave Campbell put out something too, talking about like, hey, I think Saskatchewan stole Edmonton's playbook of these short slant passes, whatever. Yeah, really weird offense. Jason, what did you make of this one?
Ultimately, Mason Fine was fine in this one. I thought that he was okay, but ultimately the number that tells the whole story is 0 touchdowns. And I thought it was a big missed opportunity for Saskatchewan. This could have been a massive win, and it was a winnable game for the most part for them. Their defense played really well, really dominated the BC offensive line throughout this game. And I thought that if Saskatchewan just got one quality drive from their offense where they punched it in the end zone, they definitely could have won this game. So I thought this was a very disappointing game from their perspective on the offensive side for Saskatchewan. I thought that BC's defense becoming one of the stories of the CFL season. Just I don't know how many touchdowns they've allowed now, but I mean they are allowed like just very few touchdowns the whole season. So I think that is a big story for them. I think Matthew Betts got a late sack in this one, 10th sack, and he's all the way, on his way towards breaking the Canadian sack record, which is, I believe, 17 by Brent Johnson with the BC Lions, I do believe as well. So I think that is really impressive. I think that Gary Peters was a guy that I highlighted in the preview this week. He ended up with an interception late in this game that really kind of helped close it out for the Lions. So I thought that their defense played really well and were the driving force for this team to victory. And I thought that, Dane Evans, when I originally thought that Vernon Adams' injury was much more serious. I mean, we still don't know 100% for sure, but if it was much more serious, my big concern with Dane Evans coming into this offense was that he's not the most mobile quarterback compared to Vernon. He's not a guy that's going to, extend plays. So I think that was a big concern because of how BC's offensive line has looked like it's regressed over the past couple of weeks here. But I think it's very good news to hear that Vernon may be back sooner more rather than later. So at the end of the day, I think that defense was the big story for the Lions in this one, and a missed opportunity for Saskatchewan.
Yeah, Vernon. I mean, that was the thing. Like, coming into the season, I think we all had doubts of Vernon. Wanting him to succeed but not being sure, and then here he's really been on fire, except for the 6-pick Argo game, and now him going down. We're fans of Dane Evan. Did you feel like is he a suitable replacement? Was it worth kind of having him stashed here in the back pocket to pull out?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, you want to go, Jason? It's all good.
You can go if you want, man.
Evan,
right.
Go first.
All right. I mean, look, I think Dane Evans was definitely worth the wait here. I kind of had in my notes, it wasn't a spectacular performance, but I'd take him over Mason Fine, just because, he had the touchdown pass, was a bit more efficient, still went over 200 yards. So like he was definitely ready for the opportunity. And I had said, previously, this would, Dane Evans would be a great trade asset given all these quarterback injuries. They wouldn't be likely to trade him in the division. So him going to Saskatchewan or something like that wouldn't be very viable. But ultimately, I thought he was a good trade piece. But now, I mean, again, you're looking at, we don't know when Vernon's going to be back. I mean, just the state of the CFL in general right now, to have 2 starting quarterbacks that are, or at least capable of starting, multiple games on your roster, that's like unheard of practically. I mean, BC's in a spot here where they really have that luxury. And it kind of reminds me of, when Hamilton had Dane Evans and Jeremiah Masoli, and there was this kind of, fight, I think, sometimes between some of the fans. And, back when I covered the team, it was always, who's the better quarterback? Is it Dane or is it Jeremiah? Who do you play? And now, in BC, it's like, I mean, I still think Vernon's the better option, and I don't really think BC fans are arguing about that. But I mean, hey, Dane could come in and play really well, and who knows, then maybe you're starting to question whether or not Vernon starts again. Now, look, I mean, that's all hypothetical. I do think Vernon will come back and start the rest of the season, barring any setbacks, because he has been really good, and I think he's exceeded all of our expectations this year. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, Dane Evans, I think, was great to keep around, and it was worth it, and it still is.
Same question to you, Jason. Was Dane worth it?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's definitely not a perfect quarterback. We saw that last year in Hamilton, but I think still at the end of the day, he is still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I still think he's in the top 12 or so quarterbacks in the league. I think he's probably the best backup in the league right now, at least the most experienced one. So I think at the end of the day, I mean, he's going to have some issues. He may turn the ball over more than Vernon will. I mean, I mentioned the play extension abilities, more of a pocket passing guy, but I think at the end of the day, he's definitely a suitable backup that BC can still win with because their defense is that good.
We had the thing here, Jamie and I, friend of the show. I wanted to talk that we had the roughing the passer that was called back, right? Was it holding or whatever? And then this about like do you want to see a quarterback change? Like, Jason, where would Saskatchewan go here? Like, I don't know if Fine kind of was the backup guy. Like, what would they do if Fine is not the answer?
Well, I know that they have Jake Dolegala on the roster. He used to be a backup. I think for 1 year he dressed for the Cincinnati Bengals, didn't get any playing time. But, I mean, we saw him start one game last year for them. Didn't look too promising. So I think they're just better off just rolling with Fine for a few more weeks, see if he gets a groove going. And then, maybe if they're still around in a few weeks, if they're like still in the playoff mix, I think maybe they look around the league for maybe a trade option or a free agent pickup. But at the end of the day, I think I would just stick with Fine and see if it gets better.
Yeah, no, I guess it was a roughing the passer. This was before I sat down to watch, God forbid, here a couple of drives. But the roughing the passer, right, that was called back for the safety. Evan, did you catch that?
I did not, actually. That's interesting. Yeah, I only watched a part of this game. I mean, we're going to get into the whole, how many games did you watch question here, because that always seems to come up. And, apparently I know nothing about the CFL because I don't spend, 16 hours or whatever every week watching every game. But no. I did not see that is the bottom line. If you really want to hear what games I watched half of the Calgary-Ottawa game. I watched like half a quarter of this game. And then I watched most of the Hamilton-Toronto game, and then most of honestly, probably all 4 quarters of the Edmonton-Winnipeg game, because I was actually intrigued by that one, believe it or not.
We're going to get canceled. Jason, talk to me about the roughing the passer call here.
Yeah, so, I mean, this was a huge turning point early in this game. It looked like I can't recall the play specifically. I think it wasn't like the most dirty hit that I've ever seen, but I think that, at the end of the day, they're going to call any hit that's up high on the quarterback. Really, that's just the way football is going, even if it's unfair to defenses. I think that's just the way, that the leagues are protecting their quarterbacks nowadays. But yeah, it was a huge turning point early in this game. I mean, would have obviously given Saskatchewan 2 points and then given them the ball back as well. So, I mean, it could have been a big swing in this football game, and it was tough for Saskatchewan.
Speaking of, who probably watch all of the games here, I had a couple of tweets and then CFL put it out together. Chad Ochocinco, did you know a friend of the show, Chad was on, I believe, episode 2 of the Markcast, if you want to go back talking about, and we actually broke the news to him that the CFL season was canceled. So if you want to go back, into the record books for the Markcast. But Chad watching the show here talking, Sean White was clutch when I was in Montreal. He's still clutch later, if that's the same Sean. And then CFL put out this thing. POV, you're watching the games last night with Chad Ochocinco. Evan, any thoughts on that? I mean, I think that's good pub. I think when you have someone like Chad that has as much, kind of cloud in the Twitter space, and obviously he's spent time in the league and everything else.
Oh, it's great. I mean, yeah, Chad, I remember, I was really young when he, kind of had his stop in the CFL. I think it was after he was with the Dolphins and all that kind of fell apart. But yeah, no, I mean, Chad, look, man, if you're getting publicity from Chad Ochocinco, you're doing something right. I mean, that guy has always been very vocal, very I've always liked him in the media space just because he's very, honest, straightforward, tell it to you like it is, no BS type of guy. And I've always appreciated that. And I think it's cool to see him, constantly promoting the league. And he's not one of these guys where it feels forced, right? Like he's actually just sitting there in front of his TV like us, enjoying the games on a weekend, or, at least the games that we're able to watch, on any given weekend. But yeah, no, I mean, look, I think Chad is, he's great publicity for the league ultimately.
We had another just last tweet here on this. I posted on Twitter, we're going live. What did we learn? Farhan checking it. We learned it's great when your sole focus is the CFL. Hey now. Farhan's not liking the USFL content on here. What are we talking about? And the Raiders. Jason, thoughts on that? Anything else? I mean, wide game here. BC, a win's a win here. It was kind of ugly. I think that's what I tweeted out. Any other thoughts on this one?
Not really. I think that Craig Dickinson had a very controversial decision in this game. I think that he went for it on a 3rd and 2 inside the 20-yard line. He actually got that one, and then a couple plays later, they had a 3rd and goal, and then decided to kick a field goal. So, I mean, some of these in-game decisions by these coaches, I think, are quite confusing. I think Dave Dickinson, Calgary, had a couple of those this week. So, starting to question some of the in-game coaching decisions for some of these coaches. Orlando Steinauer we'll get to with the Ticats as well. So, I mean, that's another takeaway I had from this game.
Yeah, was it last week when it was like, they call it like the Brothers Bowl or whatever, when you got the Dickinsons facing off against each other. Evan, anything else on this one? We'll move on. No, Evan is that. All right, let's get back here. Let me pull this up. Toronto coming in. Was hoping this one would be a little bit closer. I'm sure if you're Jason on here. Jason, were you at this game?
No, actually, I was on vacation on Thursday and Friday, had to watch those games on demand after the fact. I was, I actually was on my way back from vacation when this game was going on, so caught a bit of it on the radio, but ultimately, when I went back and watched, I think that this game was pretty much over in the second quarter because the Ticats defense, I thought, really needed to play well in the first half to give their rookie quarterback making his first career CFL start a chance. They ultimately battled back, made it a one-score game in the fourth quarter, but then that's when their defense kind of fell apart again. So I thought that it was very disappointing how the Ticats started this game. It's been all too common of a theme so far this season for them, but the Argos, like I said earlier, are a fine oiled machine, and Chad Kelly really is the story of the CFL so far this season.
I thought we were I know we've had obviously the quarterback change here. I thought the Ticats were getting back to running the ball here a little bit. We have 41 attempts by a rookie coming out here, only 8 carries by Butler. Jason, what do you make of that?
The game script. I think that's what happened is they fell behind 20-0 in the second quarter. Yes, one of those plays was interception by a bad decision by Powell, but I think that the defense gave up a couple of long drives early in the game, and we're down 14-0 and then 20-0, and then that really dictated how their play calling was the rest of the game. They really had to drop back and pass and see what they could do, and I think that Powell did pretty good considering.
Evan, thoughts? Chad Kelly, still Chad Kelly in Toronto, certainly being able to put up points here. 31. I think that's the lowest they've had, right, in terms of average game score. But what did you make of Chad?
Yeah, so we'll talk about Toronto first. Chad Kelly at this point, I mean, it's just kind of textbook, right? I've said it with Winnipeg and Zach Collaros and their crew. You kind of just know what to expect after a certain point. And now it's kind of like every week if Chad Kelly doesn't throw for 250-plus yards and 2 touchdowns and complete 70% of his passes, I'm like, well, what happened? But now it's just like this kind of automatic thing. I mean, bottom line is he really is that good. And this question keeps coming up. Like, is Chad Kelly the most valuable? I'm pretty sure he's the most valuable quarterback, but valuable player in the CFL as a whole right now. You can definitely make that argument still, and I think he has the most hype around him. There was still now keep in mind, like Chad Kelly, finished that Grey Cup game off, and we always talk about that. But there were still some questions about him heading into this season, like whether or not you can actually hold that momentum. I don't think everyone in Toronto was just sitting there like, yeah, like Chad will be fine, he's a bona fide starter. Like, to be honest, he was really unproven. He was coming in, from the NFL where he, really only played in the preseason. I think he appeared in like one game with the Broncos, but didn't throw a pass. So he was very, unproven going into the CFL, and really outside of that, Grey Cup game, he hadn't done much. And, now this season, it looks like, the development is finally starting to show, and maybe it's happening a bit quicker than some of the other quarterbacks in this league. But yeah, man, Chad's still got it. It's the Swag Kelly era, just like it's the Dustin Crum era, I guess.
Yeah, two outstanding quarterbacks. Jason, what did you make of Chad Kelly here? We got the 2-0 here for the QEW rivalry.
Well, for NFL fans that may be watching this, one guy that he kind of reminds me of is a young Ben Roethlisberger. He seems like a guy that, he's a big guy, hard guy to bring down in the pocket, has a big arm, has a bit of ability to extend plays, not the fastest guy in the world, but can get out there and run if he needs to. And I think that the deep ball passing, the arm strength is just so apparent when you see him. Just doesn't look normal for a CFL quarterback. He had a couple of throws in this game that were absolute lasers. I think he had the one touchdown to Curly Gittens Jr. that I was like, wow, there wasn't much room to throw that ball into at all. And he got it in there. So I think it's been incredibly impressive for Chad Kelly so far this season with the Argos.
Let's talk a little Hamilton here. I had Todd gets angry on Twitter, but I thought this was good. How does Orlando Steinhauer still go unquestioned as the head coach in the CFL, let alone have a job? Evan, what did you make of the Ticats' approach to this game?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to talk about Steinhauer first before, the Ticats overall, I do think there is questions about that. I mean, yeah, we don't really talk about it. Not often that we talk about coaches on this show. I think it's more player focused, but I mean, Orlando Steinhauer, the Ticats are clearly entering this phase where it's a bit of a rebuild. I mean, you've moved on, from your two sort of bona fide quarterbacks. Brandon Banks, who was there for a long time, like that era is kind of long gone already. So it's definitely kind of entering a new phase, and is he the one to lead this team through the new phase? Well, I think he'll stick around for this season. But if you're looking ahead at 2024, I mean, yeah, you're definitely going to hear more questions about this later on, I think. But overall, just this game and kind of the approach, again, inability to run the ball, I think really hurt Hamilton. James Butler had this incredible game against Edmonton last week. Now keep in mind that's against the Elks. I get it. But still had a really nice game. And then this game, you wouldn't have even known he was playing, really. I mean, yeah, he had a couple catches and things like that. I love James, nothing against him. But when you're, averaging 1.8 yards per carry on 8 touches, I mean, that's just so forgettable. And it's really like if your quarterback is the leading rusher, in the game, that's typically not a great sign. Now, it worked for Ottawa. I believe Dustin Crum was their leading and perhaps most efficient rusher. But in this case, Taylor Powell, who was in his first CFL start, had to throw the ball 41 times. And, that's just not – now, I think he did a pretty good job given that it was his first start, completed 27 passes. Could have averaged a bit more here and there. I think there was still some things lacking. But ultimately, the one stat category, I guess, that really stands out to me from him is that 283 yards there. I mean, he was really getting the ball around to different receivers. And moving on to that category, I think it was really nice to see Terry Godwin step up in this game. Now, for people who don't know who Terry Godwin is, he was a former 7th-round pick of the Carolina Panthers in 2019, then went on to the Jaguars, and I think he was with another team before coming up to Hamilton. But that was someone I think I had my radar on preseason, and then I kind of forgot about him. And then, I was watching this game and I'm like, oh, that's right. Hamilton has Terry Godwin. And I think him and, Duke Williams again, finally kind of got going in this game. I don't think last week he had a target, let alone a catch or anything like that. I think Terry Godwin and Duke Williams, if they can kind of be a 1-2 punch in the receiving core moving forward, regardless of who the quarterback is, whether it's Bo Levi or Taylor Powell or maybe Matt Schultz comes, back down later in the season. I think those two guys right now are probably the best options for Hamilton on offense.
Jason, how are you feeling this season?
I think the biggest concern with me, and I always, when I look at head coaches specifically and how I judge them, I always look at what side of the ball are they specialized in? Are they a defensive guy? Are they special teams? Are they offense? Steinhauer is a defensive head coach, and the defense has gotten worse every single year under his tenure. And I mean, they made a big gamble. And keep in mind that Steinhauer is now the president of football operations, so he makes a lot of the personnel decisions as well for this team. And he decided to go really young in the secondary. They had a lot of experienced veterans back there in the secondary last year, and they had a pretty thin depth on the defensive line last year. This year it's flipped. They decided to invest a lot of money in the defensive line. It has not paid off, and the secondary has looked very poor. They look young and inexperienced, just like they are going into the season on paper. So I think at the end of the day, it's very disappointing to see what's happened to this defense. That used to be something that Hamilton could hang their hat on. And then I think in terms of their offense, it really just comes down to offensive red zone efficiency. And I think they just have not scored enough touchdowns. If they score 2 touchdowns more in this game, it's a brand new game. So I think at the end of the day, that's something they need to fix. But I don't know what the answer is, because the 3 quarterbacks that we've seen out there, none of them have really been able to find much success in the red zone.
I know we've talked about this, but just looking at this 8 carries for Butler is just insane to me. I get you say, we're falling behind. We have to do that. What's the timeline on Schultz coming back? Do we know anything? I know he was kind of TBD. Is he on the 6th game?
He's on the 6-game injured list, and he was up in the press box for this game. I don't know if that was just trying to give them a different view of the field or whatnot. But, it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. But like I said earlier in the show, that Bo Levi Mitchell is back at practice this week for Hamilton. So maybe they get a boost if he comes back. But I think at the end of the day, I think there's bigger problems besides the quarterback position on this team right now.
Well, that's my concern. And we'll go to Evan. Bo didn't look good when he played and got hurt, and now he's back. I mean, I don't know what Hamilton does here, because we've talked, they're hosting the Grey Cup this year. We're all going. It's like, it was kind of like Saskatchewan last year. We want to do everything we can to be in it. I mean, they were talking last year, like, break the salary cap, get everyone, do whatever you can to get to the Grey Cup here. Hamilton's trying to do that. And, if Bo comes back, I don't know if this makes a difference. What do you think this team should do or could possibly do?
I just think they need to get more from the guys they brought in this offseason. I don't know how they make that happen. I think that, like I mentioned, I think the coaching has kind of, they've kind of been out-coached in a lot of these games this year. One narrative I think we could put to bed is that I think over the last couple of years, Tiger Cats fans have thought that we definitely had that coaching advantage when they played against the Argos, that Orlando Steinauer was a better head coach and we had a better coaching staff than the Toronto Argonauts. But I think at the end of the day, now it's just quite clear to me that Ryan did what he always has his team ready, prepared to play against Hamilton. And I think Steinauer just, they don't look prepared at all to start the games. You look at the first halves this season, it's been brutal.
Evan, thoughts for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I hate to be critical of any team, and everything that I say is constructive criticism, right? It's not, a dislike towards anybody or anything like that. But I think Hamilton is in a serious period of regression. You just look at, Steinauer's one thing, but like Jason said, I mean, that defense used to be, one of the top in the CFL, led by Simone Lawrence and others. And now you kind of look at their defense and it's just like, okay, there's nothing really to write home about there. I mean, hell, you could look at some of the other bottom tier, I guess you'd say, teams in the CFL, and they probably have better defenses at that point. I think that's just because Hamilton's lost, again, so many players since their Grey Cup runs to free agency. I mean, they've retained a couple pieces, but, the team definitely looks a lot different than when I was really invested in it, even just like 2 years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a period of change, right? And, I expected this from Hamilton. Again, like, if you're talking about this game in general, I mean, I expected Toronto to win, and they did it just how I thought they would. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. But in the bigger picture, I mean, Hamilton is definitely kind of looking at another sort of, restructure. And it sucks because they were so close. I mean, they went to back-to-back, Grey Cups. I mean, it was a great run, and, that was the best that they've had really in a long time. But if you can't get the job done, I mean, that's football, right? It's a winning business. And, unfortunately, if that aspect doesn't get completed, then you have to bring new people in to try and accomplish the same goal. So.
Yeah, moving forward here, Jason, what do you want? I mean, you're the Ticats fan here. What do you want? Oh, Jason, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, so I just want more from the guys they brought in this offseason. Some guys they paid big money to that just have not made a big impact for this team this year. I think the offensive line, they made a couple of big additions late last season. Guys like David Beard, who's a center, had several high snaps in this one that kind of threw off the timing. The interception was a high snap that kind of threw off the timing of that play. I think the offensive line has been a unit that's been very disappointing this year. They've had some injuries there, but I think overall, even when they've been healthy, they haven't played very well. I think that again, the coaching is something I want to see more from. I want to see this team start games a lot better. I think a lot of the times they've really lost games in the first half of games. So I think if they come out and they're more competitive to begin games, I think they'll be in better shape. And, I think they still can salvage this season. And I think the CFL season is very long, but they need to start winning soon because, a lot of these games have come against Eastern opponents. And I think when you look at their 4 losses this season, they've been all very convincing losses. I think all of them by double digits. And it's been very disappointing to see just how, the lack of competitiveness for this team this year. I thought that, maybe they'd lose some close games and start slow this year, but I didn't think they'd lose games this convincingly.
Evan, we have here, look at the Elks are its own thing, and we'll get to that game before we get out of here. Ticats 2-4, Stamps 2-4. Stampeders feel like the better 2-4 team here. What do you, if you had to go with 2 of those kind of bottom tier?
Yeah, I would definitely take the Stampeders here. I just think they have a lot more momentum, and a lot less questions. I mean, this team, historically has been in the playoffs all the time. And, Hamilton, again, I expected regression with Calgary. I mean, I had a lot of questions, but they're kind of, I thought they'd be like at 500 by this point. They're right below. They can easily get back in the swing. And, it's like week 7 or whatever, but there's still, we're only like a third of the way through the season. So again, plenty of time here to make amends and make things right. But the one thing I was going to point out, and really it's between the Redblacks and the Ticats. So this is kind of a random thought that I had last night when I was going through my notes. You want to talk about, teams. It sort of feels like, well, now obviously it's a bit different with the Redblacks having 3 wins and the Elks having none. But we had this discussion in the XFL last year between, 2 of the bottom tier teams. It was Orlando and Vegas, and just kind of how, different those 2 vibes felt. Like both of those teams, were struggling early on, winless, whatever. But with Vegas, it kind of just felt like, again, they were one step away. Like in Ottawa's case, we keep saying, oh, they're the Dustin Crum away or whatever. And then with the Elks, it's kind of like Orlando, the Guardians. It's like, well, this is such a complex issue. There's so many things wrong here. You kind of need to break it down and examine, piece by piece, how to fix this organization, really, or team, or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of, I think you can apply that same sort of notion to a couple of the teams here in the CFL. For me, it was, again, Vipers, Guardians to, Redblacks and Elks. Obviously a bit different, 2 different leagues, 2 different times, whatever. I get it. But I think it's always kind of interesting to point out, like, there's teams that you watch and you're like, oh, like if they just had this, they'd be fine. But then there's other teams, and I think Hamilton kind of falls into this category now too, that we're talking about it, where it's not just one piece away, it's not just one thing. It's there's so many, pieces. And that's all of football, right? I don't think there's ever, one glaring thing that really causes a problem. There's always something deeper that, maybe you don't know about if you're not within the organization. But ultimately, with Hamilton, I think there's a lot of components there that are missing in order to win.
Jason, anything else from you on this game?
No, I think we beat the dead horse enough.
Last game here, and I took my gamble. I said Dave Campbell is in Winnipeg for the game. I'm just going to wager that Edmonton is not going to pull this one out in remarkable fashion here. The therapy session continues. Jason, we'll go to you first. What do you make of this? 0-7. We'll talk about the BC thing here coming up because I don't want BC to be the team that allows them to break. But what did you make of this one on the road losing to Winnipeg?
Well, Edmonton was very competitive for a lot of this game, but again, they just don't have the consistency needed, especially at the quarterback position, but just on offense in general to win games consistently in the CFL, or even win one game at this point. It's just a very frustrating team to watch. I have a very hard time watching this team week after week because it seems like they get in their own way. You could see they have some intriguing, interesting individual pieces. I thought that AC Leonard and Jake Seresna made a big impact in this one. I thought they really kind of pushed around Winnipeg's offensive line for a lot of this game, but I think at the end of the day, this team can't close in the fourth quarter. When the lights get brightest, they just kind of fall apart. So, it's the same old story for the Elks.
Evan, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, the game was tied at half, and for a while there, it was like I forget who tweeted it, but there was something on Twitter. It was like Edmonton's not going to do this. Like, come on, guys. Like, let's get real here. And yeah, I mean, they didn't. Any kind of hope you had quickly slipped away in the third quarter. And I think Dave was saying, on your show this week, like how much of a struggle the second half, specifically the third quarter, has been for the Elks. And in this game, it might have been more of the fourth quarter. But like Winnipeg, I think, scored 15 points or something in the third. So that definitely, again, Elks kind of came out of second half, and it's almost like they regress. You're supposed to make adjustments and get better at halftime. Yeah. Feels like Edmonton, constantly this season just goes backwards, like in the wrong direction, if anything. And it happened a bit too in the Hamilton game, even though that was kind of unraveling a bit before half. But yeah, ultimately, Edmonton in this game, again, they really weren't terrible. I like Taylor Cornelius, like, you take away the 2 picks. I mean, I thought he had an okay outing and, again, was very efficient on the ground running the ball, had that big play to Dylan Mitchell. Like, it wasn't all bad. Again, there's strides to be made here. And I know we've, kind of, I guess, maybe said some things about Cornelius in the past that weren't the best. And, again, I wish him the best. He's a great player. It's just sort of fit and time. And, we're always talking about Trey Ford. Now, look, I think Taylor Cornelius has made a bit of progress this season. It's just, again, how many times do I have to say it? Like, when your record or whatever going into the season, like 4-26 or whatever, or maybe that's what it is now, or at one point this season it was that with the losses that they've accumulated here in 2023. Like, it's just, I mean, come on, man. Like, I know you want to have faith and you want to be confident, but you can only give a person so many shots before you have to make a change. And I feel like there's so many things here that are just overdue. And again, this was so expected. It's like, yeah, Edmonton had, I think, some confidence that they could win this game, but ultimately it fell apart as quickly as they built it up. And then, Winnipeg, just given how, how stout they've been over the past couple of years. Now, obviously, last week was a bit of an oddity for them, I guess you'd say, but it was back to normal for them this week. Now, yeah, first half was a bit different, but if you watch this game only in the second half, I mean, yeah, Winnipeg, it was that textbook Zach Collaros finding his receivers, Brady Oliveira kind of, taking the rock with them and being extremely efficient. It was just back to normal. And yeah, I think that's like this game just felt very normal to me, given all the circumstances. Like, yeah, again, first half, maybe not, but second half, yeah, I felt like, it was just any other game. Winnipeg pulls away against their opponent. Edmonton can't get things together, unfortunately, and it just every week my heart sinks a bit more for all the Elks fans and people like Dave who spend so much time covering that team.
Jason, how has Trey Ford not seen the field?
You got me at this point. It's just, like he goes out with that big explanation that why he's not on the field or he's not playing that well in practice. But I mean, you see what's actually on the field, and some guys, I mean, they're just not that great in practice. But when the lights come on, you get them on field in the game. I mean, even look at a guy like Tim Tebow that 1 year with the Broncos. I mean, anything could light a spark for your team when you're just down this badly. And I think at the end of the day, the Elks just, with Cornelius, he just inspires no hope. And like on one hand, you want to give the guy a lot of time to develop, because we've seen in the history of the CFL, guys really don't hit their stride at quarterback for 3 or 4 years into their career. But I think at a certain point, you got to look around the league and say Dustin Crum's already shown more than Taylor Cornelius has ever shown us, and I think Taylor Powell's looked better than Cornelius has ever looked already in his first career start. So at a certain point, you need results, and 0-7 just isn't going to cut it.
Evan, I know you're going to pop off here early. Any last thoughts from you before you need to get out of here?
Yeah, not really. Like it was a pretty general, I'd say, slate of games this week. I mean, that Ottawa Calgary game, I think, really made up for anything that happened before that. But honestly, a lot of the same narratives and a lot of things that were just expected. So, this, I think, I mean, maybe I sound a bit more negative in general this week because I was so excited about last week's slate of games and how refreshing that was after just really the past, couple of years have been, let's be honest here. So maybe I sound a bit more critical this week, but ultimately, yeah, I mean, we've officially hit, the third way through the season marker, and I'm enjoying it so far. Ultimately, I mean, again, even if I have to, say certain things about certain people and players, it's all out of love for the game. And, I really hope that some of these teams here that we've talking about in a negative light can really turn things around. Now, Edmonton, I don't know. They've got a lot of changes to make there. But there's, Hamilton, I think there's still a salvageable part here. And then Ottawa obviously is already kind of, it went from their season was over to now, oh my goodness, like we're right back in the fold, possibly even playoffs here, which is crazy to think about, just given where we were, about how low we were, like when Masoli got hurt and everything. So I don't know. It's been a wild season already, but a lot of exciting storylines, and there's still some things I hope would improve. But all around, look, man, I can't complain. It's been fun.
Awesome. Evan, safe travels. Good luck. And thanks for getting your Wi-Fi hotspot on here. Jason and I will get out of here soon. But I do want to talk about this narrative here because I am scared about this. BC at Edmonton this week, talking Edmonton. I could just see like Dane plays, VA, we're going to rest Vernon. We're not coming in prepared, right? What do you, this to me is like trap game here scenario.
Yeah, I mean, every team is kind of afraid of being the one that gives the Elks that first home win in forever. But I think that with BC, the comforting thing for me is the defense. And I think the defense gives them a certain floor each week. I really don't see any way that Edmonton moves the ball in any efficient way against that BC defense. I think that the one scary thing is, like you mentioned, I think Dane Evans, if he plays in this one, he has been prone to some big high turnover games the last couple of years. So I think that could be one thing that potentially makes this game a little bit closer. But I mean, I don't really have too many concerns as an outsider to this game for the Lions.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to hear. We've talked Hamilton, Ottawa, Saskatchewan going in. I mean, this could be a scary one too here. Saskatchewan, the Mason Fine effect here with Toronto's defense. Are any fears here for our commander-in-chief there, Mason Fine?
Yeah, well, this should be interesting. This is the Touchdown Atlantic game, of course. So this should
be.
Okay, yeah. So this should be interesting to see. I think this is the first time the game is actually going to be in the city of Halifax. So everybody that talks about that 10th team, maybe this is just a look at what this could potentially look like down the road. But I think in terms of the game itself, I think that, Toronto will obviously be heavy favorites, but I think Saskatchewan's defense can kind of, maybe disrupt Chad Kelly a little bit more than he has the first 5 weeks of the season. But at the end of the day, I think Saskatchewan, they moved the ball okay last game. They got a bunch of field goals, but I think if they can get into the end zone a couple of times, they may have a fighter's chance.
Alouettes here coming off their bye, Calgary there. That's intriguing too. Want to see Calgary again. We had Tim Capper on the show talking the Arena Football League, but Tim was sharing his thoughts, and he's really happy with Cody and the Alouettes and everything there. Thoughts on that one before we get out?
Well, I think both teams will probably be pretty desperate coming into this game because I think Calgary, obviously they're 2-4, and I think if they fall to 2-5, I think they were 2-5 a couple of years ago and they were able to claw back into it. But I think this would be a very devastating loss for Calgary if they're going to fall to 2-5. And I think for Montreal, with Ottawa suddenly going on a run here to 3-3, they would fall behind Ottawa with a loss and be right in the mix there with Hamilton. So I think at the end of the day, this is a very important game for the standings. And I think the two, the games with Montreal and Calgary and Ottawa and Hamilton, those are the two games that have the most consequence in terms of the standings next week.
Yeah, it should be exciting. We're, like I said, on vacation this week, so we're gonna have the XFL combines going on. They're streaming that. Andy Murray's gonna be with me. I think we're gonna do 9 a.m. live episode on Friday when I get back. We'll do the XFL combine recap, and then we'll do a CFL Week 8 preview. So I think that's what we're gonna do this week. Because for me, trying to out here in the woods and scheduling guests and all that, I think we're gonna do that. That'll be good. So look for the live episode Friday, 9 a.m. Coming off, I think I was just checking during the show. Last week was our record high for viewership for the stream, at least on our channel. I know we co-share that, but we're getting the word out. I think it's important to do this every week. Jason, any other thoughts from you about anything before we get out?
No, just another week in the books, and looking forward to next week.
Yeah, it should be good. Winnipeg on the bye here, coming off a dominant win on that. But yeah, I have that circled with BC. I don't want to see any traps on that. Last things on here. Luis, I guess we had a comment. Do you think any of the games are going to be really high scoring, or only Calgary, Ottawa broke? That BC Elks game, I don't think is going to be high scoring, especially with Dane in there. Maybe Calgary, Montreal runs it up. I don't know. It could be an interesting slate. James here saying, great show. Here comments. I like to get to the hour mark here. We're 59:30, so we're padding the time out here. And Coach Craig Sport says Trey Ford season. They got to figure that out here. What if Trey Ford comes in and just lights up the world against BC?
Yeah, they're gonna look so stupid if that happens too. Because like why did it take this long?
Yeah, it's kind of a lose-lose this way. Jason, thanks. Godspeed. Evan, safe travels and everything else. We'll see you next time. Thanks.